Welcome back to Gale Force Wins Season 5.
Well, folks, welcome back to Gale Force Wins. My name is Gerry Carew, and I'm with a guest here today that came to me from the grandmother of one of my son's best friends. And I'm really excited about sitting with Kim to talk about her journey and a little bit about the work that she's been doing. So without any further ado, Kim, could you introduce yourself to our followers?
Absolutely, Gerry. So my name is Kim Kelly, and I'm from the Southern Shore, from Cape Royal. It's very important that you know I'm the daughter of the late Bill and Sheila, and grew up in a house full of laughter and fun and song and recitations, and learned to dance in the kitchen. From there I went to Memorial University, where I completed a Bachelor of Arts, Bachelor of Social Work, and a Master's in Post-Secondary Education.
Wow. So that's quite an introduction. Your mom and dad, what were they engaged in for a living down on the Southern Shore?
That's a great question. My dad was in the Air Force and then worked in the mines in Labrador. My mom worked in the fish plant, but my dad worked for 28 years with Canada Post and drove back and forth every day. To St. John's. And when he retired, he became an actor. He was on the Fairyland Dinner Theatre for 5 years. But him and my mom sang on the concerts along the shore. They, sang duets, and my mom step danced, and my dad recited. So that's the house that I grew up in.
And you had siblings?
I have 2 siblings, one deceased, my brother Brendan, who died by suicide, and my brother Scott, who is living in Witless Bay with his family, 2 sons and his wife.
So we'll get into Brendan in a minute, but so growing up in that community on the Southern Shore, tell us a little bit about what it meant to be so close to the ocean. What were some of the highlights?
Well, the highlights were, for me, I was really involved in my church community and my parish. We grew up Roman Catholic, and that was really part of my formation to do that. And of course, while my mom did work in a fish plant, I'm not from a family of fisher people, believe it or not. Yeah. Right? Many people were, but my mother's family were all involved in construction and carpentry, that kind of thing. And my dad's everything from forestry to carpentry as well. So, but we grew up in, a close-knit community where, we knew everybody in our classes and knew all of our teachers, and it was a great place to grow up, right?
Yeah. Were you the first to go into university and then get that education?
Yes, indeed. In my family, I'm the first, grandchild on my mother's side to go to university at all, and on my father's side, I would be probably the second person to go to university on that side.
Yeah.
So
I read on one of your bios that your mom was the one that encouraged you to get that degree. Tell us a little bit about what that conversation was like and what it means to you now to have, your background from education and university perspective.
Sure. Well, my mom used to tell me when I was young, go in there now and study. So I didn't learn how to cook. And she did the cleaning and the housework, and, always go in to do that. And my dad encouraged me at a very young age to, he got the key to the church in Cape Royal, and he wanted me to learn how to public speak. So, he brought me up to the podium and said, Kim, look up, always know what you're reading, always be prepared. And he said, every young girl should know how to speak in public. And credit my dad. But going back to the conversation about my mom, what you saw online there was that when I was doing my social work degree, my brother died by suicide. And I questioned whether I would continue the social work program. What would people think?
Yeah.
What was it for me? So I took a year's leave of absence from the program, and it was my mother who had a grade 8. Actually, she didn't have grade 8 education. It was grade 7. And she encouraged me. She said, you go back. She said, you will never regret to go back and doing that social work degree. And my wise mother was very wise at that point, because I never did regret. And it's really informed, I coordinate a vigil to remember people who died by suicide. And I don't know that I would even know how to support survivors of suicide loss without that social work background.
Yeah.
And so between that and I'm a presentation associate with the Presentation Sisters and associated with Mercy as well. I have a really strong, I'm a woman of faith, a really strong background in parish. I'm involved in the Basilica community now, and have been. And between all of that really helped inform, I guess, really to start this vigil, right? Although the vigil started from a man named, I was at an ASSIST conference, so Applied Suicide Interventions Skills Training in Newfoundland, and a man was there from Ireland, Northern Ireland, with the Northwest Bereavement Team. And he talked about a vigil they do in Ireland to remember people who died by suicide. They do it outside on the second Sunday in December, which is called World Candlelighting Day. And it was started by Compassionate Friends. And so I figured, my gosh, well, we can't do this outside in December in Newfoundland. It could be snowing, right? We could have a storm.
Could be that in June, too.
But, this was in October of 2005. And, I kind of said, well, why can't we start it here? And we did. So we held the first ever vigil in Cape Royal, mostly because I really wanted my parents to have a space to come together, feel community support, and know that it was okay to remember Brendan, right? Because in those times, there was a lot less talk about suicide loss and a lot less talk about remembrance and reflection and those types of things. So, starting the vigil, was really important to give people that opportunity, right, to remember their loved ones and to come together.
What year was it again?
2005.
And how long after Brendan's death was that? Yeah.
Good question. So Brendan died in 2000, so it was like 4 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Still very, very fresh.
Still very fresh.
Yeah.
But you know what? If as a social worker, I've had the opportunity working with Memorial to do a lot of wonderful things. But the vigil has been probably the thing I'm most proud of in my professional and personal life. And it's because people really feel it gives them a place to come and remember their loved one. And the vigil has grown so much over the past 20 years. So we just had this past Sunday, the 20th annual vigil.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And so it's changed so much from when we done it first in Cape Royal. Now we have a live stream audience.
Wow.
Somebody texted me yesterday and said they just watched it yesterday and there was 1,800 views on the vigil. And we had probably around 200 people attend in person. So
that's incredible.
That's reached, and the live stream allows, which comes from St. Mark's Church, allows people from all over the country to remember their loved.
Where's St. Mark's?
St. Mark's is on Logie Bay Road.
Right.
Just around the corner. So they invited us there to do the vigil. So we started in Cape Royal. Then we went to the chapel at Memorial University because I worked there and could have access to that. And then we outgrew the chapel for space. And so it could only hold 200 people. So we were growing every year. And we went to St. Patrick's Church. And, the year before St. Patrick's closed, we were invited by Reverend Rob Cook, who was the Reverend at the time. It's now Reverend Amanda Taylor. But Reverend Rob invited us there to the beautiful space of St. Mark's. So it was a godsend because now they had this technology to do it live stream. And in 2020, we were forced to do things differently for the vigil. We were only allowed 10 people in the church, so no longer could we gather in person. So what we ended up doing was we invited people to send the names of their loved ones. And on this past Sunday at our 20th annual vigil, we read aloud the names of 231 people that we remembered by suicide.
Oh.
And we show a video slideshow as well. So we ran photos as we read the names. And Juanita Simmons and her friend Kathy Nickel, they do the slideshows. They put all the pictures together, and to the music of the Ennis sisters, Judy Brazel, and Shannon Power, all of whom are impacted by suicide loss. So
must be a pretty emotional event, given what you've just painted that picture.
oh, it is. It is so emotional.
It is available online right
It
now
is. It's
through
available
the Marks.
through the St. Mark's Facebook page.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so that's available. I encourage anyone who hasn't seen the vigil to go in to get a sense what it's like for people left behind after suicide loss. Right, it's such a moving vigil. We do the candlelighting. Peter Halley and Shelley Neville have done the music for pro bono for 18 years for us, and so we're so grateful to them. Dan Dillon, a friend of mine, plays music out in the foyer as people are coming in, and then out in the foyer again as people are gathering for coffee and sandwiches and tea and coffee, that kind of thing. And so it gives people a sense of community, and people know that their loved ones are being remembered by the pictures, by their names being read aloud, and all of that. So now we've really cut our vigil. We used to have more poems and prayers. I remember meeting with Tina Davies, who does suicide loss a lot of support activities, postvention, and that's what this is called, postvention. So after a suicide has happened, right? There's suicide prevention, intervention, and postvention. So the vigil is one example of a postvention support after suicide loss. And I remember running the prayers and the poems that I had Googled at the time 20 years ago to include. And so to have that other survivor of loss to kind of run things by. And we were doing that for a number of years. Now we only do a couple of we've really cut the program because it takes so long now for us to respectfully name our loved ones aloud for 231 names. And of course, Gerry, we know that there's lots of other names that we don't have, right? I know personally of others who have remembered loved ones who've died by suicide, but we won't put the names or photos forward unless a family or a good friend does that, right? I would imagine if we did have a lot more names, we would have, a couple hundred more at least.
Wow, really? That many?
Yeah.
Oh.
Suicide actually has a higher than the national average of suicide loss. And
In Newfoundland, you mean?
in Newfoundland, yeah.
Seriously? Wow.
And of course, suicide is one of the leading causes of death in Canada for youth, right? And so it's a global issue. I mean, mental health and addiction certainly.
Yeah.
Lots of I believe it's a pandemic, or certainly an epidemic in this part of the world, right? We see evidence of that every day, right? From the people using the gathering place to, all the need that's out there to support the Center for Hope by, so lots of people are struggling, right?
Do you think that it's certainly increased since the pandemic?
I don't have the latest stats on that, but I do believe that suicide loss in this province has increased.
Yeah. My own experience, the gathering place, as an aside, just so you know, I actually shot the very first video of the gathering place, and it's up on YouTube. My aunt, Sister Mona Carew, was part of the group that put that together. And I was there. She invited me, and I'll never forget it. Harry Brown, the former CBC host, was the host of that event. But that's up online.
I'm going to look that up.
It's. I'm pretty certain it's open to the public. A lot of videos I put up are kind of private. That one is open to the public. But so the gathering place means a lot. And I remember when they were talking years ago at that event, I never envisioned. Frankly, back then, I didn't quite see the need.
Right.
Well, holy moly! Now, and last year, Paul Davis gave me a tour, me and my business partner, and I see the need now. Oh my!
It's a great need, and every day, there seems to be more need, right? I'm involved, I'm a volunteer board member and volunteer with the Ruah Counseling Center. And Ruah, one of the specialties of Ruah that they've developed in the last couple of years has been supporting survivors of suicide loss. I've been part of a team there that's been running a therapeutic and psychoeducational group for suicide loss, and I believe that's the first of its kind in the province. And we just held an event in November, a panel discussion. Joyce Smith was on there. I do believe you know Joyce as well, and she's a member of our committee along with along with Juanita Simmons, Beth Fleming, Tina Davies, Shannon Power, and myself. Hope I haven't forgotten anyone. And I want to shout out to Carol Goswell as well, who was really involved with us in the past, Reverend Rob Cook, even Andy Jones and Marilyn Bernard, who you had on your show recently.
Yes.
And to talk about Louis, I believe.
Yes, that's right.
Who also died by suicide. So I'm really proud to be part of initiatives that support survivors of suicide loss. I believe that's so important, and we need to be doing more of that for sure.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this. What was it, the term you used, that it's post, not, there's pre?
There's pre. So suicide prevention would be anything that's preventing suicide. So talking about suicide, doing, workshops and that kind of thing. Intervention would be helping those at risk of suicide. So things like safe talk, assist training, that suicide intervention training. And then postvention would be any activity that happens after a suicide loss. So the term is that I heard from Frank Campbell, Dr. Frank Campbell, who's a suicidologist in the United States, was postvention is prevention. So whenever you do an activity to support survivors of suicide loss, then you are helping prevent a suicide, because those who've been exposed to suicide, been impacted by suicide loss, 40 times more likely to think about suicide themselves.
Wow.
So it's really important to have these spaces and activities that that support those left behind.
Without, I don't know how far you want to go into this, but I mean, after your brother Brendan passed away, how do you recover from that? And your mom and dad, how old would they have been? Because at that stage of their lives, dealing with that, I can't even imagine.
It's so difficult to look back on that time. My mom, who was salt to the earth, and I'd never seen my mom cry my whole life until Brendan had died, and she was 52 at the time. My brother was 24.
Oh my God, he's so young.
24 in 2000. He's now been gone 24 years, a little over that now. So he's actually been gone from us longer than he was alive. But I remember my mom crying and crying, and my dad, who was a quieter man than my mom, I remember that he couldn't speak for the longest time. And I remember, it was such a difficult time for us. And that's why the Vigil really helped them. And my dad was involved with the Vigil up until he died. He died of cancer in 2010. He always led the candle lighting part, because we have a script, for the candle lighting. And my dad, my dear dad, always did that. My mom always came, and they always liked talking to other people. My mom, while she didn't have a formal education, whenever somebody died by suicide, she loved to go to the funeral home and say, express her condolences.
Really?
She thought that was so important. And one of the things our family has done, which really has changed how we are restoring Brendan's loss, is we created a scholarship at Memorial University called the Brendan Kelly Memorial Award. It goes to a social work student from MUN, from the Southern Shore. And we started off, my mom actually wrote some songs and did a CD produced by the amazing Ronnie Power, who was so good to my mom charged her very little. Used to come pick her up and everything because
No
she
way.
didn't drive.
Yeah, yeah.
And he produced that CD, and we sold 500 copies of that CD. We didn't sell them anywhere, just through word of mouth. And we raised about $9,000, and the scholarship was fully endowed.
That's incredible.
And we've given that out maybe 9 times, and it's now come from $500 where we started. This year it was a little over $1,000 because it's endowed, and all community has helped raise that because they bought my mom's CD. I wrote a book about my dad because he had such an interesting life. Now, it was only on Photo Book Canada, but I only did 20 copies for the family. But when people found out about it in Cape Royal, they wanted to read it. And because I talked about, his life in the Air Force, his life growing up, his family. He was a Detroit Red Wings fan. He had a cancer and had a bone marrow donor from an unrelated donor in Calgary. I talked about his being a community servant. He was so involved in the community in Cape Royal, where I get that from. And of course, all of that, I wanted to write about it. When my dad was dying, because we had lost Brendan by suicide, we actually did a living wake where we invited people to come while he was living to say their goodbyes. I invited them to write stories and narratives and reflections. When they were gone, I would read it to them. Some would tell them, but some didn't want to because they were saying goodbye. Yeah. And then I wrote this book, about him. And when people got the book and we had such requests for them to read it, they would put money in the back of it, and we would put it into the scholarship. So, and even at MUN, we were trying so hard to raise money for the scholarship, that people from Alumni Affairs recognized what we were doing, sending $20 here, $40 there, and they started, a group of them and some friends at MUN started getting their money taken from their paycheck to fund this scholarship, right? So it was just amazing. Yeah. And MUN did a story on it, and they called it Remembering the Life of a Brother, and the Gazette, the University Gazette, and they did the stories in 2018. They profiled the 12 most popular stories of 2018, and the story about my brother and his legacy was one of the most read stories. And so trying to turn loss into legacy has been really important for my family. And, we were the first family to put in the university calendar, the Brendan Kelly Memorial Award remembers Brendan Kelly of Cape Royal, who died by suicide. And then we talk about, as a university, he got his BA from MUN. As a university student, he was involved in chaplaincy, residence life, and community service. So we were trying to look at, yes, he died by suicide, but every person who died deserves to be remembered, no matter how they died, right? One of the things we talk about at this vigil is some of the messages are that we want people to know, that yes, your loved one died by suicide, but we don't want people to be defined by suicide loss, and your loved one shouldn't be defined by suicide loss. Remember and reflect on all the things they did in life. The positive, the Christmas memories you have, maybe it was watching Christmas recitals or band practice or, hockey or whatever it was, remember those things. Don't let suicide loss be the only thing that's left behind to remember your loved one, right? Really important to remember those positive things, right? And to do that, because everyone does deserve to be remembered, right?
Kim, you talk with such passion. Obviously, Brendan has left an incredible legacy himself, but your journey, your 24 years now of helping others, you should be very proud of yourself for what you're doing. And I think about your mom and dad going to that vigil. I can tell that vigil has helped a lot of people.
It's helped a lot of people. And even people come up to, in fact, like on Sunday, I couldn't get out of the church there because, before going out into the community room, because people were coming up saying how grateful they were and people love to see the pictures of their loved one. They love to hear the name out loud, because there's sometimes that doesn't happen. People don't always invite these conversations about their loved one. They're almost afraid to make them cry, right? But, when I have these emails that people say, thank you so much for doing this. Thanks to you and the team and the committee, because I don't do it alone, right? I'm the woman behind the microphone, the woman here today, but there are all of those committee members that I mentioned are such an important part. Like Juanita and Joyce put up posters everywhere around the city. Juanita helps get these media interviews and get those discussions out, right? And they help with so many things, in terms of putting the program together, and couldn't do it alone. But it is something, I am proud of this, but it's a journey I never would have imagined, right? I'm a bit like my mom and dad, like public speaking, like to MC things, and like to read at church and do all those things. But one thing I never imagined was that I would be talking to you today about my brother Brendan. And I feel, I guess, as a social worker, being a woman of faith, and being from the family that I was born into, where we told we had an obligation to help others, that we had an obligation to serve our communities, and that, an obligation for social justice. I remember my dad, he called me once, it was voting time, and I didn't vote. And my dad never said much. He was a quiet man. Even though he was an actor on stage, if he was here now, he wouldn't be the one doing the talking. It would be my mother if they were here. And I remember I said, oh my God, Dad, I was so busy, studying and, doing university things, that I didn't get a chance to vote. And I could tell the disappointment for the first time in my life. And he was a feminist, and I didn't know. I did a women's studies minor. I learned that he was a feminist. And he said, all of those women, he said, fought so hard for you to have that right, for you to have a voice. And
Whoa.
I tell you, it was the
You
last
must have
time.
felt like crap after that.
Gosh. After that, I voted in every election.
Yeah.
And, so these are some of the things, my mom and dad would be so amazed now to know that 1,800 people have watched this vigil. So, 2,000 people in total, and, and counting, because people still can go in and watch it. They would be amazed. I know my dad would be amazed. He didn't get to see the scholarship.
No.
And my mom used to love to come in to present that scholarship every year to the recipients of that award, right? And I had the privilege, when working with the School of Social Work, that I emceed that event every year, and it was such a beautiful thing, not only for us to remember Brendan, but for all the people who have legacies in the form of scholarships for their loved ones. What a great thing to do. No longer work for a memorial, but if there's a way that you out there want to remember your loved one, you can do anything from volunteering at the gathering place to putting a park bench maybe in somewhere that they loved, or putting a rock somewhere. It doesn't have to be elaborate. Putting a light on a Christmas tree in your community. We remember Mom, Dad, and Brendan, when Cape Royal does their memory tree of lights. We have a scholarship, but there's lots of people who are doing things in their community to remember their loved ones, right? The Jacob Puddester Foundation, for example. I donated a pop-up banner to Ruah in memory of my parents, so that I would see that every time and know, and my brother too, to know that, they're still being remembered because of important work that's still being done.
A couple of questions come to mind. They're both related, and they may be tough. What does death mean to you?
Well, as a Catholic, it might mean something different to me than others. I mean, my dad used to say that dying was a part of living. And I heard Sister Elizabeth Davis last week. I met her at a wake, and, she was asking me about the vigil and how we're doing. And I was saying how, one of the messages at the vigil is for people to rediscover joy, to learn how to do that in whatever way that works for you, right? And she talked about Catherine McCauley, who is their founder, and she said she talked about life being sorrows and joys mingling together. And I mean, death means to me that the person is no longer with us physically, that they have left this life. But I believe that there's a greater purpose in life, because why are we else here? You know, the world has been around for billions of years, and we are just a small little dot. And I believe that our loved ones have gone to a place where, you know, Brendan is with my mom and dad now, and they're together. And you know, going back to my dad, that dying is a part of living. That you know, it's just I look for ways to keep Brendan with me, and some of the work that we do in our group at Ruah with survivors of suicide loss is we encourage people to try to look for ways to keep their loved ones close, right? So whether it's, you know, saying grace around the table, putting an ornament on the Christmas tree, lighting a candle at your dinner table, etc. It's looking for ways to keep the memories alive. So for example, my nephews, my brother's children, Liam and Cian, who never knew Brendan because they weren't alive, you know, they weren't born yet. I believe they know as much about Brendan as me and Scott remember, because we've included him in our discussions. We've included him in our conversations. So while the death of the physical Brendan, you know, and my mom and dad too, right? They didn't die by suicide. They both died by cancer. But we live them with them in our lives, because they were such a part of us. When the death of a loved one happens, you know, the grief comes from love, right? Yeah. You couldn't have grief without the love of that loved one. Rick Singleton says that, who's the grief and bereavement specialist. And, you know, so we know that love has happened. So how do you keep that love in your life? Because while they have died, the love that you have for your loved one never dies. Love never dies. Right?
Beautiful. It's interesting. My follow-up question, as I was thinking, was, what does life mean? But I think you've kind of answered it. But I'm going to ask the question anyway. What does life mean to you?
Oh my gosh, life. What does life? That's such a big question.
I know.
To me, life means the earth, the environment. It means people. It means love. It means connection. It means giving to others. It means enjoying what you can. It means, you know, when you have sorrows in your life, what is it they say? You got to feel it to heal it. So you've got to feel those feelings to heal. And my colleague, Lori, who's a social worker at Ruah, that's what she talks about. You know, we talk about that in our group, you know, that you've got to go through those intense emotions. And those emotions are part of life, right? Life is about laughter, about crying, about sadness, about joys, about, you know, all of those things that we yearn for, right? That life is just as Catherine McCauley talked about, joys and sorrows mingling. Yeah. And managing that and reaching out when you need help, right? So this is a difficult conversation that we're having here today. And if you are feeling that this is traumatic for you or triggering, you know, the Newfoundland and Labrador has 811 line, right? That you can call 24/7 if you are having a mental health and addictions issue that you want to talk about. And of course, www.bridgethegap.ca. That's operated by the Newfoundland Labrador government. That's available 24/7 and has a host of resources available. And there's a youth button that you can click and an adult button. So there's lots. We've come so far. You know, we're not there yet, obviously. The minute that we can equate physical health and mental health and the same money and the same resources go into that's when we'll be on an equal playing field, so to speak, of support. But we have come a long way. And the fact that government does have, the Our Path of Resilience that they're working on, the plan for that. Myself and Joyce Smith and Tina Davies, there's a number, Megan Francis Riggs is on that too. Lots. They've called upon people like ourselves and people who are survivors of suicide loss, people with addictions background, people with, all kinds of things to help advise them on what they should be doing. So I'm proud to have been a part of that work for the last 14 years as a volunteer. But I will say, Gerry, that while I do all of this suicide support stuff, this is not just what I do in my life, so suicide loss support is not the only thing, For me, I sing in the Basilica Choir.
Right.
And we have such a great team there. Jacinta, who, used to be, Graham Mackey or Mackey Graham, sorry, Jacinta, is our illustrious leader, and Arlene Simmons, and they lead us. I find there's great I get such great self-care for myself when I go there and sing with the...
It's important, isn't it?
Important. And, I'm a seasonal decorator. I'm a seasonal decorator of self and the house. I have 9 Christmas trees. But
9 Christmas trees?
I do. They're only small. We only have a small house.
Yeah.
But, I don't let Brendan's death or suicide loss define everything that I do, because none of us should be defined just by that, right? And so I try to find joy where I can. I'm a big I love to watch curling, for example, and I go to my nephew's hockey games. And so they're all important in what I do. My husband, dare I not, he sings in a band, and, I love to sing myself and all that. So
what band is he in?
He's in a band called Ashtray Minor. So they just play out a couple of years.
What a great name.
What a great name. I don't like the name, but I'm glad you think so. But they only play out a couple of times a year. But, he goes to practice every Thursday night and they jam, and it's a really big thing, right? So I just encourage people out there who are impacted by suicide loss to really, as Christmas coming up with this difficult time, to think about what traditions you are able to keep, but also what traditions you might need to start new traditions, right? So how do you keep your loved one as part of your current traditions as you are able? If people start inviting you to places and, all the things you used to do, for example, if your husband has passed away and you no longer want to do those things because you did it as a couple, well, give yourself permission to say no. You are in the driver's seat of what you say yes and no to. Or if you feel you're able to go, have an exit plan for if you don't want to stay the full time. Like have a friend or, your son or daughter or your child text you, right? To say, are you doing okay? And that might be your text to say, oh my gosh, I've got to go. Just think about those things. Think about saying no when you don't feel you want to go someplace. If you're a supporter of suicide loss, if you know someone who's lost a loved one to suicide, reach out to them, because they are not always able to reach out to you to tell you how they're feeling, or to tell you what they need to go to or what they can go to. So if you're supporting someone, invite them, to places. Invite them for a cup of coffee. Invite them to talk about their loved one. Because when people die by cancer, you always say, oh my gosh, it's always, people talk about their loved ones and they invite others to talk about that. But when it comes to suicide loss, I can tell you from conversations, I remember being at a conference once, a suicide loss conference. This man came up and he was there staying at the Wilds, and he said, oh, what are you doing here? He was chatting away and whatever. And the minute I said I was at a suicide loss conference, well, he couldn't pour his coffee quick enough and he was out like a light. Because it's, even though taboo, stigma is being reduced, we're talking about it much more openly and honestly, but there's still people don't want to upset people. So I would say invite that person to talk about their loved one. And if they don't want to, they can say no. But we really need conversations to happen that loved ones get included who are gone from this life, and because they are not forgotten by their loved ones. So how do you, as a supporter, reach out to that person to invite their loved one to be talked about? That's really important.
Well, Kim, we usually ask to give a piece of advice, but I think you just summarized the entire conversation in that last point. I'm going to say thank you. We've been talking about 39 minutes now, and I can tell you this, that, despite the fact that Gale Force Wins is primarily a business podcast, as I said before we hit record, I think there's a lot of people, no matter what their career is, need to hear this type of conversation. What my takeaway from today with you is that it's the human connection that really matters. Would I be right in saying that?
Absolutely,
yeah.
Absolutely. And looking from, this story is about inspiring others, right? So we hope that we're inspiring people to remember their loved ones and to inspire hope, right? Candles even inspire hope. On the darkest night, one candle could be seen from a number of places, right? So we want to inspire hope. We want to have the stories of loved ones remembered. And I guess one piece of advice, if you will, that I want to say to those who've lost their loved ones to suicide is, you are not to blame. It is not your fault, right? So that's one thing that really important for people to know, that it is not your fault. You are not to blame. It deserves to be said twice. Well,
I would imagine that that's probably the biggest stumbling block for parents or anyone around, friends. This has been a wonderful conversation. You're doing incredible work. Let's, last question is this. So you've talked a bit about the vigil, a lot about the vigil. If someone wants to reach out to you, are you open to those conversations? Others, like how would someone reach out to you?
Okay, excellent. So if someone wants to have their name read aloud for next year, for example, or to have a picture of their loved one sent in for next year's vigil, which is going to be on Sunday, December 14th. So it's always the second Sunday in December. And St. Mark's has agreed to host us again for next year. It's going to be at 3:00 p.m. You can email me at kakelly@mon.ca. If you are interested in joining a suicide loss group, you can contact the Ruah Counseling Center. So that's now. I don't remember what they're, but if you Google RUAH, which means spirit, then you contact the Ruah Counseling Center and you can go on a wait list for our group, and then we will people can join that group, and it's an 8-week closed group. And if you're in that group, Ruah will actually provide counseling to you as well. If group counseling is not enough, then you can have that counseling. But certainly, I do meet with individuals and families pro bono who've lost loved ones to suicide. If I do get that call, but I don't, again, it's not the only thing I do,
right.
But I would suggest to contact Ruah. The other thing is Tina Davies runs a weekly suicide loss support. It's a support group, so different than the group we run at Ruah, which is more therapeutic. But theirs is an open group. It runs on Monday nights at 7:30 at 878 Topsail Road, I believe that it is. And it's Tina Davies, and you can reach Tina, tgdavies99, I believe, at gmail.com or hotmail.com. I can certainly get that information to you. That's not a problem. But certainly, and if you're looking to sponsor, if you want to support suicide loss activities, I will put a plug in right now for the Ruah Counseling Center, because we are a nonprofit agency that's looking for funding, and we are looking to secure long-term funding for the Ruah Counseling Center. And it wouldn't go to me. I'm a volunteer, so I don't even get paid for the work I do with them. But they have Emilio Day there as the executive director. director. Brittany Hiscock is a social worker there. Samantha Lake is the administrative assistant there, or office manager. I'm not sure what her title is, but you can reach out to them. I am actually the chair of their fund development, and so I will tell you that your money will be put to good use. They offer counseling at no fee for individuals who at no fee, reduced fee, or full fee. Wow. But even their full fee is $90, which is almost half the fee of a regular counseling session elsewhere. So if you're looking to donate, you want to make a difference, give the gift of counseling, give the gift of hope, then please reach out to the Ruah Counseling Center and donate. Thank you.
Well, Kim, I just want to say thank you for coming on. This is not our normal kind of content that we would put on, but I think, as I said to you before we hit record, incredibly important. When Juanita reached out to me, there's a whole host of pressures that are on everyone, and I think that the work that Kim and all of those people that she mentioned do is really important, because the community is all of us. Right?
Absolutely. And suicide affects everyone, right? So suicide loss knows no bounds. So no matter your level of education, your financial security, your race, your ethnicity, your religion, it doesn't matter. And so to help support survivors of loss, it requires a community support and help too. So it is a community issue, but also everybody needs to be involved in that level of support.
Kim, thank you for being on the podcast, and thank you to you for joining us. If you've gotten this far into our 46-minute conversation, this conversation has meant something to you. What all I ask of you to do is please share this widely in your networks. When we post this, it's really important to get this message out, because the community needs to be stronger, and this is the face of leadership in our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Gale Force Wins. That's Gale Force Wins, WINS.com.